Welcome to GK Quiz Prime Time. The ninth schedule to the Constitution of India was added by which Constitutional Amendment Act? Correct answer is option A, First Amendment Act 1951. Which Constitutional Amendment Act constituted the National Commission for Scheduled Tribes as a separate constitutional body? Right answer is option C, 89th Amendment Act 2003. By which Constitutional Amendment Act was Part 9B titled Cooperative Societies inserted into the Indian Constitution? Right answer is option C, 97th Amendment Act 2011. Which Constitutional Amendment Act froze the number of seats in the Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies till the year 2026? Right answer is option D, 84th Amendment Act 2001. Under which Constitutional Amendment Act did education for children between the ages of 6 and 14 years become a fundamental right? Correct answer is option B, 86th Amendment Act 2002. Which special feature of the Indian Constitution related to constitutional amendments has been borrowed from the Constitution of South Africa? Right answer is option C, Special Procedure for Constitutional Amendments. By which Constitutional Amendment Act was it provided that a national emergency can be proclaimed only on the ground of armed rebellion and not internal disturbance? Correct answer is option C, 44th Amendment Act 1978. Which Constitutional Amendment Act reorganized the Northeastern region by creating 5 states and 2 union territories? Right answer is option B, 27th Amendment Act 1971. By which Constitutional Amendment Act were provisions relating to municipalities added to the Constitution of India? Right answer is option A, 74th Amendment Act 1992. Which Constitutional Amendment Act included the Tamil Nadu Reservation Act 1994 in the ninth schedule to protect it from judicial review? Right answer is option B, 76th Amendment Act 1994. Which Constitutional Amendment Act expressly provides that the President of India is bound to act according to the advice of the Council of Ministers? Right answer is option A, 42nd Amendment Act 1976. By which Constitutional Amendment Act was reservation in promotion for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes extended beyond November 1997? Right answer is option B, 77th Amendment Act 1995. By which Constitutional Amendment Act was Goa granted full statehood and Daman and Diu made a separate union territory? Correct answer is option C, 56th Amendment Act 1987. In which Constitutional Amendment Act were backlog vacancies of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes excluded from the 50th reservation limit? Right answer is option B, 81st Amendment Act 2000. Before the enactment of the 104th Constitutional Amendment Act, under which article could the President nominate members of the Anglo Indian community to the Lok Sabha? Right answer is option B, Article 331. By which Constitutional Amendment Act was education transferred from the state list to the concurrent list of the Indian Constitution? Right answer is option C, 42nd Amendment Act 1976. What is the minimum age required to contest elections to Panchayati Raj institutions under the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act? Right answer is option B, 21 years. Which constitutional amendment act restricts the total number of union ministers to 15% of the total strength of the Lok Sabha? Correct answer is option A, 91st Amendment Act 2003. Which constitutional amendment act made it mandatory to appoint a minister for tribal affairs in the states of Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand? Right answer is option C, 94th Amendment Act 2006. By which constitutional amendment act were states entitled to receive 26% share of the net proceeds of central taxes? Right answer is option C, 80th Amendment Act 2000. By which constitutional amendment act was the separation of any state from the Indian Union prohibited? Correct answer is option B, 16th Amendment Act 1963. In which constitutional amendment act was it provided that constitutional amendments made by Parliament could not be challenged in courts? Right answer is option C, 42nd Amendment Act 1976. By which constitutional amendment act were 27 land reform laws passed by 7 states included in the ninth schedule? Correct answer is option C, 78th Amendment Act 1995. By which constitutional amendment act was a new Article 334A added to the Indian Constitution? Right answer is option D, 106th Amendment Act 2023. Which constitutional amendment act reorganized the governance of Delhi by providing a 70-member legislative assembly and a 7-member council of ministers? Right answer is option B, 69th Amendment Act 1991. The abolition of the zamindari system was facilitated by which constitutional amendment of the Indian Constitution? Right answer is option A, First Amendment Act 1951. Which constitutional amendment act increased the maximum limit of profession tax from rupees 250 per annum to rupees 2500 per annum? Correct answer is option C, 60th Amendment Act 1988. By which constitutional amendment act were Articles 102 and 191 amended and anti-defection provisions added as the 10th schedule to the Constitution? Right answer is option C, 52nd Amendment Act 1985. Which constitutional amendment act inserted Article 371A into the Indian Constitution, providing special provisions for the administration of the state of Nagaland? Correct answer is option B, 13th Amendment Act 1962. In which constitutional amendment act were states allowed to relax minimum qualifying marks for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in promotion to government jobs? Right answer is option D, 82nd Amendment Act 2000. By which constitutional amendment act were Konkani, Manipuri, and Nepali languages included in the 8th schedule of the Constitution? Right answer is option C, 71st Amendment Act 1992. Which constitutional amendment act made the proclamation of emergency issued by the president non justiciable, meaning it could not be challenged in any court? Right answer is option B, 38th Amendment Act 1975. By which constitutional amendment act were state land reform laws kept outside the jurisdiction of courts by placing them in the ninth schedule? Correct answer is option A, First Amendment Act 1951. By which constitutional amendment act was the National Judicial Appointments Commission formed, though it was later struck down by the Supreme Court? Correct answer is option C, 99th Amendment Act 2014. Under which Constitutional Amendment Act has one third of the total seats in the Lok Sabha, state legislative assemblies, and the Legislative Assembly of Delhi been reserved for women for 15 years? Right answer is option C, 106th Amendment Act 2023. By which Constitutional Amendment Act was the President's power to withhold assent to a constitutional amendment bill taken away by substituting the words shall give his assent? Correct answer is option B, 24th Amendment Act 1971. The 40th Constitutional Amendment Act 1976 was enacted mainly to amend which article of the Constitution of India? Right answer is option A, Article 297. Which Constitutional Amendment Act prohibited the requirement of reservation for scheduled castes in panchayats in the state of Arunachal Pradesh? Right answer is option B, 83rd Amendment Act 2000. Under the 31st Constitutional Amendment Act 1973, the maximum number of seats in the Lok Sabha was increased to which figure? Right answer is option D, 545. By which Constitutional Amendment Act were Articles 371D and 371E inserted into the Constitution relating to special provisions for the state of Andhra Pradesh? Right answer is option C, 32nd Amendment Act 1973. Which Constitutional Amendment Act removed disputes relating to the elections of the President, Vice President, Prime Minister, and Speaker of the Lok Sabha from the jurisdiction of the courts? Right answer is option C, 39th Amendment Act 1975. Which Constitutional Amendment Act imposed a ban on defection by elected members of political parties in legislative bodies? Right answer is option B, 52nd Amendment Act 1985. In which Constitutional Amendment Act was the Tamil Nadu law providing 69% reservation in government jobs added to the ninth schedule of the Constitution? Right answer is option C, 76th Amendment Act 1994. Which Constitutional Amendment Act empowered Parliament to determine the limits of India's territorial waters, continental shelf, exclusive economic zone, and other maritime zones? Right answer is option D, 40th Amendment Act 1976. Under which Constitutional Amendment Act did Arunachal Pradesh get its own legislative assembly and council of ministers while remaining a union territory? Right answer is option C, 37th Amendment Act 1975. By which Constitutional Amendment Act were the members of the legislative assemblies of Delhi and Puducherry included in the Electoral College for the election of the President? Right answer is option C, 70th Amendment Act 1992. Which Constitutional Amendment Act added Article 51A to the Indian Constitution, establishing the duty of parents and guardians relating to the right to education? Right answer is option B, 86th Amendment Act 2002. Which Constitutional Amendment Act provides for the collection of service tax by the central government and its distribution between the center and the states? Right answer is option B, 88th Amendment Act 2003. From where can the initiative to amend the Constitution of India be introduced? Right answer is option D, any House of Parliament. In which Constitutional Amendment Act were subjects such as education, forests, weights and measures, and protection of wild animals and birds shifted from the state list to the concurrent list? Right answer is option A, 42nd Amendment Act 1976. Stay updated, stay ahead. Subscribe for more current affairs and competitive exam prep.